Hello and welcome to this video lesson. This video lesson will be related to the to the test that you recently completed, and during this video lesson I will highlight the main problems encountered, the main issue that students completing this test had. It is very important to understand these problems and not to repeat the same mistakes in your real test, because they do have a negative impact on your overall writing band score, so they lower your band score. Before we start with a list of mistakes, it is a good idea to read the question another time. I'll give you a very brief moment for that. So this is the question that you were asked to complete. This is an opinion essay, and as you see, this question asks you to what extent do you agree or disagree. This is the typical question asked for opinion essays in IELTS. A number of mistakes, task achievement, vocabulary, grammar, and so on were encountered during this during this test. Let's see them one by one. The very first one, I want you to read this introduction very briefly. Alright, so this student is not introducing the topic properly. When you read this introduction, you don't understand what the question is about. In your introduction, you basically need to paraphrase the first one. I need to paraphrase the second sentence, but this introduction here, written by this student, is very broad. And also the thesis statement is not very accurate. The student is saying, I provide the reasons why I disagree with international tourism, but the question is not asking you to agree or disagree with international tourism. International tourism is the broad topic, and what you need to do in this essay, you need to talk about benefits or disadvantages that international tourism brings to the inhabitants of touristic places and their environment. Alright, so this is a model not to follow. We have seen how to write an introduction during our writing classes. Write a general sentence, something like, nowadays there has been much interest in understanding. Introduce a topic which is general tourism, and then perhaps it's a good idea to mention both sides and then show the reader which side you agree with. And at the same time, so it is the same introduction here. This introduction is not working very well because you've got many ideas that are not given in the question. The question does not talk about airlines, hotel chains, travel agencies, and so on. The question does not talk about the support given by governments, local residents, political parties. Do not do this because it is very easy to go off topic in the real IELTS test. So another time, all what you need to do, just write a broad sentence where you mention international tourism. This is important because you are showing the examiner that this essay will be about international tourism, and then introduce both sides and pick a side. The examiner needs to read your opinion. And we've got another introduction here. I do want you to read it. Read it for a moment. Two main problems with this type of introduction. The very first problem is this one here. Just a minute. So the first type of problem is this one here. Some people believe, if you mention some people believe, perhaps it is a good idea to, so as a reader, I expect you to talk about the other side. So some people believe, however, I agree with those. You are representing one point of view. Some people believe, and I expect you to represent the other point of view. That's the logical progression, which this guy is now doing. And also the topic sentence here, if you see, it's a bit broad, very vague. I'll give an explanation. Explanation of what? Some kind of justification. Explanation is followed by some kind of justification. This is confusing. So this guy needs to have a more direct thesis statement. All right. Let us see another type of example. And in this example, this is a body paragraph 1 written by some of you. We do have a contradiction. So somewhere in this paragraph, the guy is contradicting himself or herself. I want you to read this paragraph and find where the contradiction is. I'll give you 2 minutes for that. So this guy what is the main idea here? The main idea is more good than harm is brought by international tourism, which is a good main idea. Why? Is this guy explaining why? Because it's a very good explanation actually, because not only does this activity, just be careful if you use does, you need to write generate, not generates, because does is the verb. Generate in this case is not the main verb. So not only this activity does this activity generate more income for local businesses, and we've got an explanation here, such as hotels, so the idea is quite clear, but it also helps local people to broaden their horizon. So the idea put forward here is broaden their horizon. It's not clear how local people broaden their horizon, but this is followed by a very good explanation. So this is because, very good use of this here, the reference word, which goes back to the previous idea. This is because more people with different cultural backgrounds visit a certain place, more the inhabitants in those touristic places interact with foreigners and gain more knowledge about other places. So I can clearly see here how the inhabitants gain more knowledge. Very good explanation indeed. So this guy is doing a very good job. He's mentioning and he's going deeper. He is explaining the ideas, and this is very, very important in IELTS. But you've got this little part here, this little sentence, that last one. In fact, in 2017, researchers from the University of Sergio Arboleda found that the top touristic cities in South Africa have been the ones with less pollution than others. And here it's where this guy is getting the reader confused. Here he's talking about, he or she, that does not matter, he's talking about positive impacts. Then this sentence comes out of blue. The example needs to go back to the previous sentence. So the example needs to say something like, in fact, in a 2017 study, researchers from the University of Sergio Arboleda found that people who live in big touristic cities are more likely to accept ideas from other people, to be more open-minded than people who live in rural areas. So your idea, your example has to exemplify this part here, what you're saying in here. So don't do this, don't contradict your ideas. Your example is not a good idea to write an example that comes out of nowhere. Your example has to follow. That is very, very important. Okay, let us see the next problem. Not explaining your ideas. So I want you to I will give you a very brief moment again, and I want you to see where this guy needs more explanation. Sentence 1, sentence 2, or sentence 3. So do read it, please. Okay, so the first idea, is it clear? More good than harm is brought by international tourism. This is quite clear. And in the second idea, I expect you to explain why. Why and how. So what this guy is saying, not only tourism benefits culturally and economically a country, but how does that happen? You need to explain. Don't only mention, but explain, go deeper. So this idea is not fully explained, but it also brings education for its inhabitants. And again, how does tourism do that? We've got a problem here, coherence goes down, and task achievement because you're not explaining your ideas. And you are adding a new idea here without explaining the first ones. So what we've got in this paragraph, we do have 3 different ideas and none of them is explained. Please do not follow this example. You need to explain. So if you're saying that tourism benefits culturally and economically a country, as an examiner, I need to see why. What is the rationale? Why do you think that is the case? And that's where you go deeper. That's where you explain. The next example, it's another example of not explaining your ideas. And I do want you to do the same thing actually. Read the sentence, the paragraph, sorry, again, and find which examples are not fully explained. All right, so I hope that was enough time to explain it, to read it. It is a good paragraph. I mean, good example. The only thing, if you write something like this, you do need to give a very brief justification. So why this cannot be generalized. This is very, very important. Write something like, so while interesting is very unique and cannot be taken as a representation of all the touristic places around the world, because what is the guy talking about? Yeah, about because there are many other touristic places where the environment is sustained. There are many other touristic places around the world where the environment is well maintained despite millions of visitors every year. So all what you need to do here, just a very brief sentence, similar to what I wrote, because there are there are many other cities and sites, touristic sites around the world that has maintained the original environment, the original the original environment despite millions of tourists every year. This is where you need to briefly explain if you are using this example, and this is from the model that we saw, please explain it briefly with just one sentence. And that's another example of repeating your ideas, actually. Repeating and not explaining your ideas. So do read this another time briefly. I'll give you 2 minutes for that, and try to understand where the ideas are repeated and where the ideas need further explanation. All right, so a clear topic sentence, but we do have a repetition here. So this idea was made and explained in the previous paragraph. Do not repeat the same ideas because you'll be penalized for that. Here you need something else, never repeat the same ideas. And we do have a problem here with explanation. The student is simply mentioning without going deeper, without showing the reader how tourism improves the economy of a country. And the same thing, this test taker is doing the same thing here. Just mentioning without showing why and how. So again, don't do that. You need to mention one idea, and you need to show the reader why that is the case and how that happens. Okay, let us carry on then. This is another example, another mistake that some of you have made, and the mistake is giving very general ideas to support your main idea. So again, read this paragraph. I'll give you some time to read it and try to understand where is a general idea, what is not going very well, what is not working in this paragraph. Okay, the first sentence is working quite well. The second sentence is also working very well. This is all from the model. This test taker has memorized it and it's okay, but we've got the problem here. This is too broad, too general. It does not offer anything new at all. If you will mention who is they, first of all. This is very, very broad. If you want to mention an example, the model does mention an example, which is the study, and you can mention something like, indeed, a study carried out by researchers at the University of Toronto in 2017 found that, that's what you need to say now. Talk about this. Found that touristic places, famous touristic places such as Ibiza and Corfu are currently suffering from from severe environment issues, as they have 20% less trees nowadays compared to 60 years ago. So you're showing that how touristic places, and I'm naming some touristic places, are suffering nowadays because they've cut down the trees. Okay, so do not do this one. This is not a good example. And if you need to give an example, the example has to be very specific. Mention figures, mention years, mention figures, and the example again supports mainly this sentence in here. All right, let us see another example. And so all the examples that we have seen so far are related to task achievement and coherence. And now we are switching to a new category, which is vocabulary. Here we've got repetition. Some words are repeated again and again, and that is not good for your vocabulary. I do want you to read this example and to identify the words that are repeated again and again. So yeah, just read it, please. And here, if you see this word is repeated, these words I repeat too many times in a paragraph. Don't do that. That does not help your grade in vocabulary. If you can't think of any synonym for environment, think of family words. What is the adjective for environment? It's environmental. So environmental conditions and so on. Play with family words. Do not repeat. So instead of tourism, what is the adjective for tourism? Touristic places, and so on. So don't repeat the same words again and again, because that does not help your vocabulary. You've got another vocabulary problem here. Writing sentences that do not make sense. We've got two sentences here. I do want you to read each sentence and ask yourself, what is each of these sentences saying? And what is the problem with each sentence? All right, in the first case, what is going wrong? What the problem is the use of this word, obey. Do not do this. If you're not sure about the use of a certain word, don't do it. Don't use it. So if you use words for whose meaning you're not sure, not only you are penalized in vocabulary because you're using the wrong word, but on top of that also your coherence goes down. So do not use words for whose meaning, words that you don't know the meaning of. And in the second case, what the issue is this guy is using very broad, bad human practices. What does that mean? Don't use, this is not a good collocation. This is a very poor collocation. If you use things like this that are not practically used, so words that are not often used when we talk about tourism, you need to explain what does that mean. If you don't do that, your coherence will go down. And the same thing here. To destroy precious, natural. So what I need to see is the food chains. What does that mean? And species in general, contributors. So there are so many words just put together without actually any meaning. And if you do that, your coherence goes down. The next is grammar. We have already talked about this. We covered this like for a whole class. And many of you are still making the same mistake. Please do be careful, because if you keep doing the same mistake again and again, there is no improvement. It is very, very unlikely that you will hit that 7. Be careful, guys. So, first of all, you always need a or the if it is an uncountable noun. So if it is something like table, you can't say I want table. That is not proper English. Either I want a table, or I want the table, or I want some tables. So countable nouns always need a or the or some in front of them. So before we knew it, it became a hot touristic place. Place is a countable noun. On the other hand, I firmly believe that oftentimes international tourism has a positive influence. So influence is countable, you need a. So be careful with this. Please do be careful, because these are very basic mistakes. And if you keep doing these basic mistakes, your grammar actually goes to 5. Missing of s for plural is another common mistake. Alright, so in this case, those who claim that tourism has been beneficial on many is not one, is many, so you need many ways. And the same thing here. Visitors, or beaches, and natural parks. Parallel structure, guys. Beaches is plural, visitors needs to be plural, and national parks needs to be plural. So be careful with the use of as for plural too. Subject-verb agreement is another area where you need to focus a bit more. So if the subject is in plural, if the subject is they, you need to say they go. They is many, go is a plural verb. If the subject is in singular, if the subject is he or it or she, the verb needs to be in singular too. So he goes, it goes without saying. Be careful with this too. So what we've got here, those is plural, claims is singular. A plural noun like those, in this case a plural pronoun like those, needs a plural verb, claim. Finally, environments are exposed. Environment is singular. You need a singular noun. You need is exposed. And international tourism have affected. Have is plural, tourism is singular, so has affected. These foreign visitors, visitors is plural, this is singular, so you need this for plural. These. International tourism, tourism is singular, bring is plural. International tourism brings some benefits. So be careful. If the subject is plural, the verb has to be in plural, and if the subject is singular, the verb has to be in singular too. And the very last area we are focusing right now, on is missing main verbs. Every sentence needs to have a main verb. Been is not a main verb. Ibiza, that has always been. So the main verb is has always been. Be careful with that. This is caused. Sometimes I totally disagree. We've got two verbs here. Sometimes some totally disagree. Sorry, not sometimes, but some are totally disagree. You don't say I totally disagree. You simply say I totally agree or I totally disagree, not I am disagree or I am disagree. So some totally disagree. This is the last mistake, very common mistakes, and unfortunately these were very common. Like the majority of you did have these mistakes. Watch this video again and again and make sure that you work on these areas. When you write, when you submit an essay, please make sure that you have checked these mistakes, because this is the only way in which you can improve your writing. So again, before you submit your next essay for evaluation, for assessment, do make sure that you have paid attention. You have been careful with all these mistakes.